Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast.
Tonight, I need you by my side. Hold on to me and keep me in the light. And when the shadows get long and the whippoorwill song is so loud that it hurts.
What's happening, all my woods people? We are sitting, and it is warming up. We're sitting here in Texas. It's warming up, quickly, dude.
Where did spring go?
It was cold this morning.
Was it?
And last night.
Well, yeah, I guess we didn't have to run the air conditioner last night, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty
dude.
nice. But, like, I ran today, and it's like summertime hot outside. But it's not, temperature-wise, it didn't reflect that. I guess it's just the humidity and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's humidity.
Oh, man.
We've been having so many rains. It's been kind of like, I don't know. It's been one of them things that, like, when you get rains this time of year, you're like catfish, man. You're going to be in the creeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you have a baseball game you have to coach that night or something like that, and you're like, okay, well, there's no point in raining then.
Oh, case in point, tonight I'm going to baseball games when I could probably be going and, like, filling the freezer full of catfish.
Yeah.
But
speaking of that, aren't we supposed to do some big catfish fishing soon?
we are. I was thinking about that this morning.
That's happening.
It's coming up in about a week. We need to get lines out and stuff for that. So that's exciting.
Let's do it.
Man,
next
there's
week,
nothing
dude.
like catching like some stinking big old giant tadpole looking 80-pound catfish.
Flatheads, dude.
Cool.
Just like you, man. Oh, man. So, dude, what's been going on, man?
With me, a couple things of note, okay? I have been farming.
You're a farmer.
I am a farmer.
Farmer Smith.
Farmer Smith, all right? So I grew up watermelon farming. I've probably talked about this a little bit on the podcast, and I'm trying to get a little bit back into it. I've got a half-acre of watermelons, which a half-acre isn't a lot of land, but when you talk about watermelons, it's a lot of watermelons.
More than you can eat, at
More
least.
than you can definitely eat as a family. More than we can probably eat as like a network. So there might be some sales involved this summer, which will be nice because I'm going to probably help fund my philanthropies or whatever you want to call them. The fun things I do with it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I actually have a bunch of plants at home in cells that I need to get put in the ground as soon as it dries out enough to do that. So.
In cells, not sales.
No, not in sales. I'm not in sales. It's like the Georgia way of saying it, you know. I'm in sales at the house.
So your sand or your soil is
sandy.
perfect for this kind of stuff,
It
right?
is a watermelon place. The place I purchased actually was a watermelon farm for many years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I think they stopped farming in like 2004 or something like that. So it's been fallow since then. Nothing has been done with it. Maybe a little bit of shredding here and there. So we should be popping this year. And that also means that elsewhere where there is not a watermelon plot, that there's some nice native warm season grasses that are coming on, along with some forbs. There's also some non-native sourdock infestation going on over there, which it's not the actual word for it. I think it's curl dock or something like that. Anyways,
The stuff you can chew on.
yeah, stuff that's sour when you chew on it. But I I just figured out recently that it's a non-native. I looked it up, and yeah, but it's like infested. But the good thing is that kind of dies out in midsummer when it gets real hot. But anyways, all that's going on. Great little wildlife area. And then come this fall, once the watermelons stop producing, it's probably going to end up being a late season food plot where those watermelons are.
Does the watermelon plot help in any way? Like help the
Help the soil?
Food plot?
Like amend the soil with the watermelons
Does it do anything to help the food plot next year, or is it just like it's just tilled up and ready to go?
No, I think it's just because it's tilled up and ready to go. Because, I mean, the watermelons, pretty much, I don't know a crap ton about this stuff, so don't take my word for it. But if it's not a legume, it's not helping the soil very much. I think that's about what I know. You know, like soybeans or peanuts or whatever.
Peanuts, dude. You should do peanuts, man.
I know. People
Deer
do
love
peanuts. Yeah, do they eat the tops out of them too?
I don't know for sure what all they eat. I just know that when we hunted out Memphis, Texas way, there's a lot of peanuts up there back then, and they would be all out.
You got to dig
peanuts.
a peanut, right? In underground?
Yeah, they're roots, I think. Yeah.
How weird is that?
Yeah.
It's kind of strange.
Legume.
Legumes.
Legumes.
That's how.
It's another Georgia thing.
No,
isn't it?
what's his name? Carl. No, not Carl Miller. The other
might
guy.
be.
No.
I know who you're
We're
talking
blanking.
about.
The QMA guy. He's not actually QMA, but
No.
he's at one of those schools.
Yeah,
Anyways.
yeah.
The guy who says, just burn it, right? That guy. Man, why are we blanking on his name?
The
Anyways,
ultimate.
yeah, so that's going on. And then this past Sunday, we, as a youth group, I get to be part of the youth group since I'm the youth minister, so it kind of helps me be young, you know? Mm-hmm. And sometimes I get in a young state of mind. And I decided to run a sprint foot race against one of our high school football players, whom I was about to pull ahead of, and then I started to pull a hamstring and had to pull up. So I did not beat him to the van and really jeopardized my September hunt. And it really made me think about what I should probably be doing and what I should not be doing. And running sprints without stretching is probably not a good thing to do. So I ran today for the first time on it. I let it rest for 4 days since I've done anything leg-wise. And felt pretty good. I took it easy. Didn't run real fast. Didn't run real hard. But I could feel it. It was sore. I stretched it really good. But I think that it's not an injury. It's just a pain. So I just kind of got to watch it for a couple weeks, and I'll be back to normal.
Craig Harper.
That's right. Dr. Craig Harper. How could I forget?
Yeah.
Dude's a G, man.
Yeah,
but
he loves to tell you you're wrong.
I know, dude. He does say legumes.
It's his favorite thing is to tell people.
He's one of those guys.
No.
Yeah, it's one of those guys when, like, he tells you you're wrong and you don't even care because you're like, oh, you're right, Craig.
Yeah, you're the best. You know everything. Really, you do, though.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
sarcastically.
Yeah, but that injury, like, really, I mean, you and I have talked about it a lot, like, with the whole September hunt coming up. Like, there's a lot of preparation that goes into this, and some of that is preparing your body, and some of it's preparing your gear, and some of it's being prepared mentally. And I think that those are all three things that we have to start thinking about, because for some reason I've been really keyed in on gear and hunting strategy, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it as well. You know, and this is where, like, having you around kind of helps too, because you think of things that I don't always think about, and vice versa. So,
Really?
yeah. You don't think so?
I don't know. I feel like you thought of everything. pretty much.
No, you think about stuff like like, for instance, like the camera equipment stuff.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, like, who needs to carry what and how it needs to be done and what production looks like for this deal. Because, I mean, let's be honest. We're the element, right? We're not just Tyler and Casey hunting, so we want to record this thing and get it like to the best production value that we can.
Yeah, do it
and that's
justice.
why Anthony Warren, who was on the podcast last week, he's actually going to be joining us on that hunt because he's a G when it comes to running the camera. We're going to do, Tyler and I actually kind of have a strategy with this, right? So what's the breakdown of the dudes here?
Well, so
I don't need Anthony's stats. I mean, more like
yeah, 6'2". No, we're basically when in elk hunting, it looks like to me, and I'm no expert, but from you and from the things I watch on YouTube, it looks like to me the best way to get elk to come in when they're bugling and to call them into range of a bow is to have a guy calling like 60 yards behind the hunter. So the hunter, you know, can once that elk starts committing and coming, the hunter can be ahead of the caller so that the elk is still expecting that there's elk like 60 yards ahead and just kind of bulls his way through the brush and gets shot at 20 yards, right? And doesn't have a clue what's going on. Instead of coming to like 45 and looking out behind a piece of brush, and stopped there. So that's kind of like the dynamic that is probably going to need to happen. So what we're going to do is probably I'm going to be that guy, even though I don't know how to call elk. I know how to call some things, but elk is not something I've really done a whole lot with. And
you can just do a mallard hail call in the tube, and it works.
You think? I can make that work.
I'm kidding. Don't do that.
So I'm going to be learning to do that this summer and working with KC on what he likes as far as calling goes, and then we're going to kind of talk about some scenarios, and I'm going to be ready to be that guy who's 60 yards behind, hopefully able to see KC still through the woods maybe, because I would like to be able to shoot a little video. But and Anthony's going to be the over-the-shoulder guy.
Yeah, so that's what you talked about, is like you'd be kind of the bridge between hunter and videographer, and then Anthony be concentrated solely on on video, and me be concentrated solely on hunting, because honestly, like part of what we do a lot of times is I think our hunting skill suffers a touch because we're trying to do video and hunt. Like
or
this
vice
year,
versa.
Yeah, this year I would have killed a buck on Texas public land in early November if I hadn't been trying to get it on video.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm willing
stud too.
I'm willing to accept that, right?
Yeah.
Like that, I'm not complaining about it. That's
Right.
just the way it is.
And it's vice versa too, though. Like, because I look at it like there have been times, especially so like in our rutcation type hunts that we've done, where we're like, day 4, it's been a struggle. Nothing's happening very good for us right now, and then all of a sudden there's a buck. You know what I mean? And like he's there, and so we get footage of him. He doesn't come within range, and then he goes, and then nothing happens the rest of the day. Well, crap, we haven't put any footage down today because we're just like tired, and we're hunting and we're trying to kill something instead of trying to make a video out of it, and you end up getting like this kind of cool clip with no story around it. And it's like, look, I don't know how we just put a 10-second clip on like some dad would, on YouTube, and leave it there for 10 years. I don't know, but that's kind of like it is. It does affect, both things affect the other thing. And so having an extra hand there and having designations of like, which KC is still, it's his story. So he's got production thoughts, and he's going to have them during the hunt too. But I just want him to not think about the camera when it comes to killing a bull, because this is a tag that may or may not draw ever again as a non-resident.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, and that's why even now I've been trying to put a lot of thought into the hunting strategy, and it's a thing that I'm not quite prepared for, because I think I really know, and I'm confident in saying this, I know how to kill OTC elk in Colorado. It's not what we're going to hunt at all. And in fact, that's why we reached out to the guest that we're going to have on the show today, Mr. Cody Rich of the Rich Outdoors. You may have listened to his podcast before. If you haven't, you probably should, because it's a great Western hunting podcast. He has a ton of guests, a lot of, I would say, like obscure guests, guys who are like the killers and maybe not so much the media types. So those are the dudes the media types that you see on TV and stuff spewing information, those are the dudes they learn their stuff from, right? So like these dudes are legit. Anyways, Cody's pretty legit. Killed a bunch of elk. He's a herd bull hunter. So really kind of more of that idea or ideology of like what I need to be thinking about. And I'm hoping that amongst other things, he can kind of enlighten us a little bit on like how I should approach this hunt, because that's just something that I just wasn't mentally prepared for even drawing at this point in time, So it's like, yes, all options are on the table, but I don't even know what those options all are at this point in time.
Yeah, well, maybe we can gather some knowledge here and then go with a new, fresh mindset into the map scouting and start to define those options a little bit.
Man, I hope so.
You ready to get him on the phone? You got anything else?
Nah, that sounds good.
All right, let's do it. All right, so now on the phone we have Cody Rich from the Rich Outdoors podcast. Cody, what's happening in your world lately, man?
Oh, not a lot, man. Ready for the snow to go away. It's,
I was going to ask, dude, y'all are still kind of cold up there, huh?
Yeah, it's Montana weather. It'll, like, tease you and be sunny for a week or so, and then just bam, snowstorm.
It's crazy. We were up you're in Bozeman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in Bozeman August last year.
Yeah.
And there was snow. The snowstorm came in. I mean, I was like, I've never had an August where it was 50 degrees as a high,
Yeah. It's pretty epic, too. Actually, we had a float trip on the Yellowstone that morning, and we drove in, and, like, all those mountains around there were just all snow covered, and our guide is, like, walking around the water barefoot, and it's, like, 45 degrees. Like, dude, you are crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. And even, like, during September, like, during hunting season, sometimes you'll just get hammered with, 6-8 inches of snow, and it's like,
They're
Man.
crazy. That's a different world than where we live in right now. We basically live in Mexico. So, yeah.
You guys are out of Texas, right?
Yeah. We're in Texas. We're in East Texas. It's really closer to Kansas than it is like Mexico. So
Yeah.
but we got a big state. I'm sure you can relate there in Montana. But you're not originally from Montana, is that right?
No, originally from Oregon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a transplant. Everyone in Montana is, and it's like, is what it is. It's kind of funny because, like, I come from like 8th generation farm in Oregon, and so, like, everyone knows your last name, or, like, small town type stuff. And so then I really feel like that asshole when I moved to Montana. I'm like, yep, I'm the new guy.
Yeah.
So how long does it take for the new guy to, because I feel like there's constantly new guys. So sooner or later, you're like a veteran, right? Like you like get your tenure and you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, like, actual locals will just scoff at this, but, like, my buddy Ben, he's been here for like 11 years. I'm like, oh, so you're like a native,
Yeah.
No kidding.
That's cool, man. So, how'd you end up there, man? What's the reason you're in Bozeman instead of Oregon now with all your connections back home?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, some political and some non-political, but I think at the end of the day, like, one of my mentors growing up, he was actually a Mason at the time and just did a lot of bow hunting. And crazy enough, he ended up getting some skin cancer and always wanted to be a guide. And so he basically had dropped his masonry company and just to be a guide, like, he didn't have a whole lot of time left on earth. And so he just, like, I'm doing everything I want to do. And so he ended up becoming a guide, moving to Montana, and he ended up living for, a number of years with his cancer, but, lived in Montana. So I'd come out and see him, and he lived right on the Jefferson. And it was like, man, this is the life I was supposed to have, just living on the river and whitetails running everywhere and, elk and moose and all kinds of, critters. And it was just like one of those things like, man, I want to live there someday. And I think it was always a someday thing. It was never like, oh yeah, I'm going to make this plan. It was just a someday thing. And then, we were in Oregon, and my girlfriend and I at the time, it's kind of one of those deals where we were looking to move. She was looking to go to school somewhere, and it was kind of like, well, let's just go to Montana, and do that. She can go to school there. We can test it out. If it doesn't work out, we can always move back. And, I think that's some of my biggest advice is I get a lot of people ask me about this. It's like, hey, how do you just make the jump? And I think when you make it a temporary jump or put an ability to kind of reverse the decision, it makes it a little bit easier. So if you say, hey, we're going to move to Montana for 5 years and we'll see how that goes. If not, we can move back. Newsflash, no one ever moves back. So.
Yeah.
When you said he was a Mason and was into archery, I was thinking Freemason, and I was like, okay, is there like a clause like in their little organization where they can't shoot guns at animals and they have to use bows? I didn't quite understand, but I'm with you now. So would you say
like a bricklayer?
Yeah, gotcha. Would you say that like that dude was probably like your biggest hunting inspiration or mentor, or do you have a few you kind of look up to there?
It's interesting. There was a few. My dad was a big hunter, and he was a big elk hunter, but he didn't really do a lot in archery. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, my dad passed away when I was really young, and so I was lucky enough that there was a lot of people that kind of stepped into that role. And so I had, a lot of mentors growing up, if you call them that, a lot of people that helped, just because, my dad died unexpectedly when I was 14. And so there was a lot of people that were able to step into my life. And you know, my dad was a big hunter, but he was pretty young when him and I hunted together. And he taught me most of what I know. I'll give him that. But he didn't archery hunt. So then my cousins stepped in. I had a lot of cousins that were archery hunters, and, you know, they'd always make it a point to take me out. And so, like, in a way, I didn't have anybody, but at the same time, I had a lot of people. And so I kind of came up, you know, learned hunting in a different way, just because I had a lot of people that were stepping into that role. But again, I really had nobody. So there was long stretches in my life where, you know, my mom would just drop me off. She didn't know anything. So she was like, I was like, I want to go hunting. And she just dropped me off at some gate.
That's cool.
And like, she'd be like, yeah, and we didn't have phones like that. She's like, yeah, I'll be back to pick you up at, like, you know, at dark or whatever. And so that was it. Like, I would just like go, and like that seemed normal to me. So, you know,
dude, my mom would have made me wear a life jacket and, you know, like had all kinds of different GPSs and everything. My mom would never have done that. So that's pretty cool.
So there's a funny story, just because it's turkey season and there's a lot of people turkey hunting. Like, my first ever turkey, I don't know, I was 14 or 15, and we saw these birds. So we have a farm. It's a pretty small farm. It's about 1,000 acres, and, you know, a lot of grass seed stuff. But my mom's obviously raised there, grew up there. And the neighbor farm, there was like turkeys out in this field, and we drove by, and I was like, oh, there's turkeys. And Mom's like, well, do you want to hunt them? I'm like, yeah, you know. So we run back to the house, grab my gun, and she drops me off like in this. It's just a field, and she's like, yeah, I got to run to town. I'll be back. And so, long story short, is like, I tried calling these birds from, like, you know, 500 yards across the field. Ended up just like stalking in a ditch line between these two fields. Shoot this bird, and I'm hiking back and not thinking much of it. And I get back, and there's a truck there, and there's a guy, and he is just furious, and he's like chewing my ass up and down, like, why'd I shoot this bird, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, no, like, my mom told me I could, blah blah, you know, like, just a little kid. And this guy is just running me through and through, and I'm just like head down, like someone just killed my dog. And my mom rolls up, and it's like the funniest thing ever, because, you know, this is Grant, who's like a neighbor to the farm or whatever, and she was older than him growing up. And so, you know, she just gave him the runaround. She's like, oh, Grant, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like, it doesn't matter. It's an effing turkey. And like, just chews him up and down. And so, like, here I go from like just thinking I was in the biggest trouble in the world to my mom just told the farmer, like, yeah, don't worry about it.
Nice, dude. Your mom was a boss, huh?
Yeah, she put up with a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's cool, man. It's crazy to all the different people that we get to talk to on podcasting, and you know the same, I'm sure, but just the different backstories and how people come into hunting and come to be what they are based off of just different twists and turns that life has kind of taken them through. And you have another really interesting story, I feel like, and I don't know it that well, but you know, it talks about it on your website, which I did some research, and you ended up at some point, according to certain doctors, you weren't even supposed to be walking today, right?
Yeah. So fast forward from 14-year-old poaching turkeys out of the neighbor's farm. And, you know, I grew up, did a lot of motocross and things. So I raced quads most of my life. And even at that time, I was really big into quads and had track. And, you know, my poor mom, she just like didn't have a clue like what I was doing. So pretty much just let me do whatever I wanted. And so, you know, I was doing a lot of racing, and then, you know, that kind of grew into, I guess, you know, you're a little bit older. I think I was 22 at the time. And, you know, I was doing a lot of racing. And so everyone always assumes that I ended up breaking my neck doing that. But ironically, just happened to be, actually got back from a trip and show up, and, you know, friends and all that, just swimming at this pond. And I'd actually never been to the pond, but I kind of knew of it. It was neighbor's pond or whatever. And so there's a floating dock out in the middle of this pond, and I show up and essentially was just going to jump into the pond and swim out to this floating dock that everyone was kind of hanging out and jumping off and swimming and stuff. And it turns out that the floating dock had 5-gallon buckets of concrete that had held it down. Well, one of the buckets must have had an air bubble in it or something, but essentially it was on the bottom of the pond, but it would just kind of float around and you know, wasn't attached to the floating dock anymore. And so essentially when I jumped off the dock, I just ran and jumped like I was going to swim out to the floating dock, and ended up hitting that chunk of concrete. And pretty life-changing moment, so to speak, but ended up shattering my neck into 6 pieces or so and left me paralyzed, which was like a real come to Jesus moment for me, sitting there being paralyzed and then life flighted. And long story short is, I ended up in the hospital for quite a long time and put a cadaver bone in there. We call it Frank. So Frank, my cadaver bone. Thanks, Frank. I don't know if that's his real name, but we're going with it.
Did they use a male bone? Do you know, or are cadavers like genderless?
I'm gonna go with yes.
Yes.
Because science. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe it's Franklin. I don't know what's up. But yeah. So anyway, it's just a weird time when you're going through that. It's like this trauma, and you get life flighted. You got 12 different doctors and all this, and I'll never forget like asking a doc, hey, what's my odds? Like, what are my chances? Like, what's going on? You're just clueless and you're jacked up on painkillers. But the doc was basically like, yeah, well, you're never going to walk again, but hopefully we can get your arms back, your arms moving. And it was like, man, that hit home. Cause at the time, like my 2 worlds were racing 4-wheelers and hunting. Like obviously both of those don't do well from wheelchairs. Doable. And there's some guys that are definitely crushing it, but it was like this huge eye opener to me. And, I think that's kind of obviously played a huge impact on how I see the world today. And, and a lot of people are like, man, you go after everything you want to do. And I mean, yeah, cause I've sat there and like your entire world gets stripped away from you. Everything you want to do or dreams or aspirations, you're like, oh yeah, well now I have this new life, and that can be tough. And so, fought through that. And from that day, like from that moment, I remember that moment of someone telling me, hey, you're never going to walk again. And right or wrong, in my head, it was like, yeah, you are 100% wrong. I'll figure this out. And I, could have been the drug stocking for all I know, or Frank, but but you have to have that mindset. And I think from that day, I've always had this mindset of like, yeah, I'll figure it out. It might take a while, but I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. And, I think that's important. But at the same time, like, another piece of that is acknowledging like everything could be stripped away. So you might as well give it a shot. And like, whether it's moving to somewhere you always want to live, or going on a hunt you always want to do, or like, like a lot of people will look at like sheep hunting and be like, oh man, that's just not in my cards. And it blows me away. Like, how can you say it's not in your cards? Like, to at least go sheep hunting once. And so like all of these things, like I just have a little bit different perspective, I think, than a lot of people. I think that's one of the things that bugs me is like so many people are like, oh, well, never. I talk to people all the time that are like, I'll never be able to go on an elk hunt. I'm like, an elk hunt? Yeah. Like, that's not that crazy. Yeah. Like, or I'll never be able to go on a sheep hunt. And granted, like, I don't think I'll ever kill the North American 29, nor do I really care to, maybe, but like at the same time, like, it's just not my goals. And so everyone has their own goals, but I see so many people that are like, it's just not in their cards. You're like, what? Like, it's an elk hunt. It's not impossible.
Yeah. What did the recovery look like for you? What was that process like?
So, you go through and, after they put Frank in, which was about a 9-hour procedure, it's a lot of rehab and a lot of, just living. Well, interestingly enough, so I go through the surgery and they take me to a different hospital, which is like a rehabilitation center. And you go there and you're just surrounded by people who have been told they're never going to walk again. And like, I don't know if there's a more negative place, but that's the most negative place I've ever been in my life. And it was just like people that basically took that as the gospel, and they were like, yeah, we're all never going to walk again. This is like where we learn how to drive wheelchairs. And it was like, man, it was a struggle. Cause like I spent the next month in this place surrounded by people that were just pure negativity. And I don't want to like talk bad about the nurses because they're great. And it's just the environment that they're dealt with on a day to day. But a lot of them were even like, it just felt like none of them really believed that anyone was going to walk again. It was just like, hey, here's here's how to live in a wheelchair. Essentially, it was like, I remember like, hey, what do you do? Like, well, I do a lot of backcountry hunting. You're like, yeah, that's never going to happen again. Like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
And so like nothing against them, they're just doing their job and it's a day-to-day thing. But I will say, like, man, it was tough to overcome like all that when you're surrounded by people who basically are trying to tell you like it's not going to happen, and you're surrounded by people who believe it's not going to happen, and it's like, man, this is like a drag. So I spent the next month, and I think like I remember the first time like one of my toes wiggled, I was like, yeah, game on, like this is it. And it was a long road from like wiggling your toe to walking.
Yeah.
But it was, like that's like, you just got to have that positive mindset. You have to have the attitude of like, hey, this is going to happen. It might take me years, but we're going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And granted, like some people, like I don't want to say that it's all hard work and dedication, because I know there's probably a ton of luck involved. I also ate a lot of blue M&Ms, so that could be it. I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely is probably it.
Yeah, that definitely helps. And like you're saying, kind of the more serious side, though, it's kind of like a will of God that you actually had an injury that you had the ability to overcome, but like you had to have that mindset or something, or a passion that drove you to overcome it. I could see a world where if maybe you weren't, or you were rooted differently, you may still be in a wheelchair just because you didn't have something that drove you. So do you think that, like, I don't know, if hunting wasn't in your life, do you think that you still would have had that drive to overcome that injury?
It's an interesting theory. And whether it's racing or whether it was hunting, like you always put yourself in bad situations. And, through hunting, I remember growing up being really little, and, maybe some of it is the fact that I was in those positions by myself. Like I remember killing deer by myself and having literally I can't move this black-tailed deer like from where it is. I'm like, it was just struggles, you're fighting through that. And so like adversity builds character, builds strength, and all these things. And so like, I think it steps up, right? Like, hunting will teach you a lot about adversity, and, being a kid growing up and hunting by myself all the time, like there's a lot of struggle and a lot of adversity. And granted, those aren't nearly at the scale of learning how to walk again, but those are precursors, right? And like going through adversities in life always build you up for the next thing. And so when you look at everything as like, and maybe that's, something you only see later in life, in hindsight, but like all these things building up, they tend to grow you as a person. And then, each thing is just another step. And so now it's like, I look at some of the backcountry stuff I do and like, like I almost look at it like, man, there's nothing. Like I can't wait to see what the challenge is. And I think a lot of people, right or wrong, tend to get into situations and then give up because they just haven't built that up yet, and maybe I was forced into it at a young age. I'm sure you guys go through the same thing. Like you're on a hunt, you're like, man, this absolutely sucks. But at a certain point, you've already been through that before. So you know that what's on the other side, what it looks like if you quit, and what it looks like if you keep going. So you tend to keep going. And so like, I think everyone has that. Everyone's just at different levels, right?
Yeah, sure. And I think, I guess kind of the harder you push yourself, like to do backcountry stuff or whatever it might be, I think about the backcountry thing because I haven't done it a lot, but the little bit I have, like you either keep pushing or you die out there. It's not to like make it seem like crazier than it is, but literally, if you don't make it back to the truck, you're not going to make it out there forever. So if you just put yourself in those situations, it'll make you pretty tough, whether you want to be or not.
Yeah, and I had that's a good point that you make there, because I had a couple of years where I was doing some film type stuff in the whitetail world with a couple other guys, and I can remember us thinking, and I talked about this weekend actually with one of these guys, thinking like, man, what a grind that season was. And we were walking like 2/3 of a mile to the stand or whatever, 3/4 of a mile to the stands, and we were sleeping in a house, like, and I just looking at it now, like, I've done just such harder things, and I'm like, it's really what we did back then was not a grind. I can remember them saying, man, it was just such a grind. And I didn't really think it at the time either, but like now I really know, like, that was pretty much cake. And so like, you make a good point that just kind of like going through certain situations, just kind of going through the fire, it's it hardens you, makes you a little tougher for sure.
Yeah, but I'll say, like, and I don't, like, this is definitely not to talk bad about any whitetail hunters, because that's a totally different grind that I couldn't do. Like, if you told me to sit in a blind for 12 hours a day for the next week, I don't know that I have the mental toughness to do that.
Yeah.
Like, and that is being completely honest. But that also stems, like, you get those guys that can do it. Like, that stems from a life of doing that and, like, just kind of working up to that. And so in the same way, that is totally different, but very applicable. I think it's like to be able to sit in a stand for a week straight, like, man, that gives me more anxiety than being like, oh, you have to hike across the Frank Church wilderness alone with no food. I'm like, man, that seems easy. Like, you want me to sit in a tree in Iowa? Like, I don't know if I can do it, dude.
Yeah, no kidding, dude. Especially when it's cold, it's tough, or hot. I'm a really fair weather guy, if you can't tell. Anyway, so at what point do you go from this guy that really, really loves hunting, has this life-altering injury, starts to recover, and then decides, well, you know what? I think I have a good story here. I'm going to start a podcast and a brand here that kind of teaches people different journeys throughout this thing, and different, and it's helpful in a lot of ways to a lot of people that may be trying to get into that elk hunt that they think they can't go on,
Well, it's funny you phrase it like that, because it's almost the opposite of how my brain thought about it.
Okay.
Realistically, like, I never wanted to be a personality of any kind. I was doing a lot of hunting. I was working for a company, and I started my first company, which is actually, I just helped the company I was working for basically kind of expand one of its lines, or one of the things we were doing. And so I put that on the internet and started down this, like, entrepreneur journey, which honestly, I think I was probably an entrepreneur since the day I was born, but never really had the opportunity. And so I started working with this company. And so I built I call it my first company, even though I was working for someone else, because I did end up buying that project from them, and kind of making that my first company. And so I went down this entrepreneur road, and at the time, like, I was just loving hunting, was doing a lot of it, started hunting out of state, kind of started hunting all over. And I just, I was working. So I had a company I was building, and I didn't have any social media. I didn't have any of that stuff. Didn't really care. I was just hunting and working. And, like, that was my passion. For a number of reasons, I saw some writing on the wall. It was like, this probably isn't the best company. Maybe there's something else I could do. And I was like, man, I would love to be in the hunting space, because who doesn't want to get paid to go hunting or have a company in that field? I was in a different industry, and I was bow hunting the whole time. So it only made sense that I combined the two, and maybe they would help each other. And so, long story short, and another part of it was really that I had reached a point in hunting where it was like, I had kind of surpassed all of my mentors in a certain way, not to down talk it, but, like, they have their own benefits or whatnot. But I had passed a lot of that. Magazines were, like, the top thing at the time, but man, magazine articles were, like, so paper thin. It'd be like, how to kill a big buck, and you're like, that's it. Like, it was like 1,000 words on how to kill a big buck. Like, that doesn't explain anything. And so, like, this idea for a podcast, I had been listening to a lot of podcasts on entrepreneurship and whatnot, and no one had a hunting podcast. And I was like, man, it would be really cool to just be able to sit down and talk to, people like, I don't know, Dan Evans about elk hunting or whoever, and just pick their brain, because podcasts I saw were, like, this great way to get so much more information. And so it, I guess, stemmed from a selfish need of, like, me wanting my own information, and, like, growing and networking into this new industry. And so it was 100% selfish, if you really think about it. And so, like, I started the podcast, and it did, it took off, and it did really well. And then that transitioned into, what is next, and which ended up being Backcountry Fuel. And I'm really good at just adding companies and not necessarily deleting any. So now I just have all three. But, and it still is, like, man, that evolved, I guess, into what you're talking about, of inspiring people, which I saw, like, I didn't think, and I still don't think I'm any great hunter. I just do things, I've probably done more than some people, and I've not done as much as others. So, like, I'm still just learning. For me, it's all about, I created this podcast to learn and to grow. And essentially I've seen that help other people and inspire other people, and which is really cool. And that's where it starts to see, all these people that are like, man, I just dream of going on elk hunt someday. And I'm like, what? Like, go, like, there's season, it's coming up. It's in like a couple months. Like, you just go. It's not this thing you put on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, I'll be going 3 different seasons or whatever. And so like, I think those kinds of things always morph, like it starts as for yourself, and you start to see the impact that you have on other people, which is really cool. And I see how many people, man, I get back from season and I see these pictures of people holding their elk and like, man, I can't thank you enough. Like, you inspired me, you helped me. This is all you. And I'm like, it's not all me, man. Like, I wasn't even there. But it's really cool to see people, be successful in something that they never thought they could, just due to the information they pull from, what I'm pulling essentially from other guests as well. So, and I'm sure you guys kind of get a little bit of that too, like it's crazy. And I think people tend to put some hunting on a pedestal, Western hunting in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what we try to talk about on our show. Some is just like, we don't really have somewhere we're trying to send guests or trying to like really enlighten them on one thing. I just hope people like feel like they can take that, whatever that next step is.
Yeah.
Whatever that next step, like the thing they're kind of scared to do, like go ahead and do it, because there's so many opportunities out there. And like you're saying, like whether that's, to go elk hunting or to maybe like, just hunt somewhere else in your state or try public land or whatever it is, it's kind of like sometimes just people need that extra encouragement. And it's so strange, like you're saying, like when somebody does send you a message and they're like, man, look what I killed, and this is partially because of you guys. And I'm like, dude, that's bigger than what I killed this year. And I feel like an idiot in the woods just running around chasing my own tail most of the time. So, yeah, albeit it might be ungrounded, I really appreciate the praise from you,
Yeah.
But,
and it's funny because you see that, like, I see people that'll hate on stuff on the podcast and they're like, like, oh, that guy doesn't know anything. I'm like, none of us know anything, dude. And if the day you think you know something, like, you're probably wrong.
Yeah.
And, so like, I think we're all kind of on a journey. Like, we're just at different stages. Like, there's dudes I look up to, and I'm like, man, that guy freaking knows it all. And I'm sure he looks at someone else and thinks they know it all. And there's someone that looks at me. And so it's like, it's just a journey. I think we're all growing as it goes. So, but I guess I got a question for you guys. It's not to take over your podcast, but
unprecedented.
What things would you guys say you hold on a pedestal or fear? What like adventure like you feel like is out of your wheelhouse?
Man, honestly, I'm gonna venture out of the hunting world. I would love to go to the Seychelles and fly fish the Seychelles, but that's like so unattainable to me. It seems like just that Indo-Pacific, like just making that trip, making that journey, and dealing with that. It's just monetarily, I feel like I can't reach it, and then just like it's so far away. I don't know. That's kind of the first thing that like jumps to mind. Like as far as like just the. Just being in the outdoor space, at least, that's just kind of the thing. And it's like, and talking to you, it's kind of like, man, is it really unattainable? Or am I just not letting myself do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sure you guys have felt this way, but have you ever felt overwhelmed?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
like just work or projects and things, and like you feel overwhelmed. And then for me, it's like when I write out exactly everything I have to do, sometimes that's more overwhelming, but for the most part, as a whole, it's like, I'll write out, say this project seems unattainable. I'm like, okay, what are the pieces of it? And like I really break it down into the pieces. Okay, what would it take to get that done? And like when you really draw it out, I think most things are pretty attainable. Like it's not as overwhelming as it appears as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way about sheep hunting. Like it's been forever. It's been like the pinnacle of what I consider something that I want to do, I guess. And so, and I've been on 2 sheep hunts as a camera guy, but stone sheep. But like I want to shoot a sheep, but like I feel like if I do it once, which I want to do, and I don't know if I ever will or not, but like if I do it once, I want it to be a bighorn. I just think the bighorn are the coolest, and so. But then I look at that and I'm like, man, the price tag on that is pretty high, and I just haven't been building enough points really to probably draw this thing ever. So. It's it definitely feels overwhelming, unattainable to me. The sheep deal does for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's most of it. But I think we did a podcast one time with one of my good friends who's like a financial planner, and it's pretty it's pretty interesting when you really boil it down to like how much it costs over, per year over like 20 years or 25 years. Mm-hmm. So like, how old are you right now?
31.
So 31. So if you're like, well, I want to do it by the time 51 even, which is not that old. You could probably almost go till like 56 or so. Mm-hmm. But you have 20 years to plan that. And what's that look like if you really mapped it out over 20 years? It's really not that expensive, right? You're like, shit, I could probably sell firewood every year and just stash away extra funds.
Right. Yeah.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah,
so,
it makes sense.
It's an interesting conversation. Like I'm the same way. Like, man, you look at it and it's like pretty daunting.
Yeah.
To be like, man, I don't know if I'll ever get there. But I think when you really just start to lay the pieces out, I'm like, okay, how would I do it? And, another interesting conversation is like, what if so you say, let's just break out over, say, 10 years, and it's a $20,000 hunt, just for easy math. So now I have to make $2,000 a year. Like, how could you make an extra $2,000 a year? It's not that much money. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In a year's scheme of things, it's it's doable. You start breaking it down to months and weeks or whatever. You put away what would that be? It would be how many 2,000. So I can't do math fast enough, but it's not that much per week if you get a weekly paycheck or whatever to put back, or at least maybe. For me, to kind of put it on a personal level, like I stopped dipping snuff about 2015. Well, that's $10 a week I save right there. Or more actually, 14. But it's just like little things that you can do in your life, and if you take those small steps, they turn into big steps later. At least that is the idea of it. But it takes a little bit of like. Personal like fortitude to actually take that money and put it towards what you want it to, and just not let it get absorbed.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the problem is everyone puts it on this like, oh, it'll never happen, so they just keep dipping stuff. And
yeah.
There goes your sheep fund.
Yeah, and you die of lip cancer when you're 15. You don't ever get on your sheep fund. It's like
it doesn't matter anyway. Cody, what does it look like to have you ever, or did you get to talk with this guy or anybody else about getting some kind of a loan essentially to go on the hunt, and think, well, if I'm going to go on a sheep hunt, I kind of would like to be 30 instead of 50, and then pay that over the next 10 years or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think we did have that conversation, and I've had this conversation with other people too. As a financial advisor, I would say I think his advice was along the lines of probably a bad idea. Yeah. But, but I can see the argument for it, and like, if you're, I tend to like lean on things that are like, okay, how else could we do it? Yeah. Worst case scenario. But like, if I was, diagnosed with cancer or whatever, of course I'm going to take a loan out and, maybe I'll pay for it later.
Maybe. Yeah. You asked what you thought was unattainable. And if like, we're going to be, like, quite frank, and this is probably let the, kind of our listeners in a little bit on our personal lives. Like, man, it seems pretty unattainable to try to make a living in this outdoor space. If we're going to just get out of hunting, like hunting goals or whatever. And I think that's why it's interesting to talk to you about this stuff because, I mean, it's what you do, right? And for us, I don't know, it just seems like maybe because of where we're located or whatever, it just seems like it's such a long, hard road to get there. So, I mean, like, what's your secret, or like what was unique about what you've done to set yourself up that way?
Man, that's an interesting question. It's like, it's so deep that I don't know we have time to get into it. But like, so there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. And I think I would say, a lot of your listeners, a lot of my listeners, a lot of people are like, how do I make money doing what I love? Yeah. And that's like the core, right? Yeah. And I can make the argument that that's great. And anytime you become an entrepreneur, you have to really, really love it, because it takes twice as much, 10 times as much work as you think it's going to. And so what happens when you see like 80% of businesses fail, right? It's because they ran out of drive. No one wants to work for $1 an hour for the next 10 years. And that's just tough. And so like the number one thing I think is like, make sure, you have a passion for what you do. But at the same time, I look at the hunting industry, and sometimes I think there's ways to make good money, but it's also a very, very crowded space, and you have a lot of really good competitors. So it can be very tough. So I tend to look at things like, my first company was in the ammunition world, and I love guns, like Western guns, but I'm not like a shooter. I'm not a 3-gun guy.
Yeah.
I'm not, a guy that shoots up 10,000 rounds a weekend. And so that I looked at that as like, man, this is, I like guns. Right. So, but you look at that and it's very tough to make money in that because there's so many people trying to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you got into something, well, and so, say you're in construction and you figure out a way to make a living in that business, which is also crowded, but let's just use as an example, is that, I know so many people that have great companies that also get to hunt probably more than I do, even though I work in the hunting industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think it's that you have to be in the hunting industry to make money. I think if there's something you love or something you can provide value for, that's the key. At the end of the day, like, you're going to get paid for the value you create. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in a competitive space that can be very hard. So not to discourage anyone, but I think, like, you have to be realistic. I got a good buddy, Tony Treach, who has a construction company, and he hunts way more than I do,
Yeah.
So like, I don't think it has to be, mutually exclusive that you're in the hunting industry. It's doable, but I would always say, like, make sure you can provide value, in something you're going to try to create if you want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the hard part is, like, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs. They just don't have, like, how do I create value? Or I think they just like, well, what's my business idea? And I think that's kind of the wrong approach, is to come at it like, oh, here's this business idea. If you have a business idea, that's great, but it's just the start, man. It's like, then it's execution. And to get to execution, you have to have passion and you have to understand it. And so, that's kind of my advice. Like, go for it. If you want to be an entrepreneur, go for it. I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever done. And it's allowed me to hunt more than if I had a day job or had to be accountable in any capacity. But, at the end of the day, it's about providing value.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that a kind of a roundabout way? It's probably not the answer you're looking for.
Yeah, it's great. And you hear a lot of guys that are in construction that hunt a lot. But there's other ways to do it for sure. And I think that, have you ever read the 4-Hour Work Week?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the book that changed my world.
Sure.
Like, that one. Yeah. Quite literally, I read that book and I was hunting, and running a company. I was like, oh my God, this is it. I just, like, these guys go to the beach or whatever. I just want to hunt all the time.
Right.
And,
exactly.
And that was kind of like what put me on my path to getting where I am.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually not made it all the way through that book, but I kind of got the gist at some point, and I was like, okay, I understand what's going on here, and I don't have the drive to make money. Like, that's not what drives me. A lot of guys do. And so, like, it's hard for me, because, like, I have a wedding films business, and, like, I don't do a ton of them. I could probably do more. And I'm just like, when I'm sitting there, during the day and I pull out my computer to edit footage, like, I always end up finding an excuse to edit the footage from, like, last week's fishing trip or whatever instead of this wedding, So, like, it just is so tough. And I look at it like, man, if I had the drive to make money, I could probably crush this wedding thing right now, but I just don't. And I would rather watch KC, shoot a turkey on video or whatever and edit it up. So I don't know.
I think I've said this before, but, like, one of the, my faults, if anybody can learn from one of my mistakes, was, like, at first it starts with, and this is my 21, 22-year-old self, is like, man, you just want to make money. You want to, like, make money on your own, doing your own thing, right? And then you make money and you realize that you're like, oh, well, now I'm making a lot of money, but I don't have any time. So you have to figure out a way that makes money, but also gives you time. And then, you're like, yeah, you finally do that and you build a company and you're like, yeah, I got money and I can have time. And then you don't have purpose. And so, like, this is like what they call the entrepreneur journey. And a lot of people do this, is where they start up this ladder of money and then they realize, like, oh, this ladder doesn't go anywhere. And so then they, like, have to climb down that ladder and go up a different ladder that's money with time. Mm-hmm. And then now they have those, and then like, they realize there's no purpose. And so they have to climb and figure out a different ladder. And that's fine. And that's kind of, like, been my thing and, what I've watched a lot of other entrepreneurs do. But it's like, just because you like have a business idea, like there's a lot of variables that go into that. And like you've noticed, like, yeah, I got my own wedding videography business, and you're like, man, but I'd rather be hunting, or I'd rather be doing this. And so it doesn't have that passion for you. And so now you're like, how do I create a company that gives me money and time and is also something I'm passionate about?
Yeah, for sure. So what aspirations do you have in regards to like hunting and business and stuff? You kind of asked us about ours earlier. Sheep was mine. Seychelles was KC's. What are you looking at, man?
Man, that's a good question. I think it's an ever-changing target, for sure. You know, I've definitely gotten bitten by the sheep bug in the last couple of years. Something I want to do.
Have you been?
No, I have not. I've never even been on a sheep hunt.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to go next year. One of my buddies is moving to Alaska, so I told him we're going sheep hunting, whether he likes it or not. But you know, it's like I've been to sheep show a number of times, and like there's something to me. I'm not driven by money by any stretch of the imagination. I really don't care. But at the same time, like there's something to be said for those self-made guys that were able to do a sheep slam. For whatever reason, like I think there's like a certain amount of accomplishment to me, and I don't know, maybe that's wrong or right. I don't know. But like just watching guys that have like done a sheep slam and been self-made, that's pretty cool to me. And so like the part of that, I don't think that's like my biggest drive in the world for sure. I'm sure it'll change over time, but you know, like just being able to go on new hunts. I'm still an elk fanatic, so exploring new elk country and killing a big bull is always on the top of my list. But you know, just like it's being able to go different places, and I'd love to go to New Zealand. Like that's one that I just keep threatening to do year after year and find excuses to be too busy. Yeah.
So, do you have kids?
I got one on the way. So
all right, dude. Congrats,
man.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, so
this may all come to a crashing end.
That's what I was about to say. But then I decided to word it differently. How do you balance that drive with like the selflessness that's required of a man who has a wife and a kid on the way? You know, but a kid eventually.
Dude, that is definitely one of my biggest fears and or concerns, or like just unknowns. You know, we fear the unknown, and like me looking out, you know, I have a lot of friends that are like, yeah, you'll be all right, you know, and then other friends are like, yeah, good luck hunting ever again, you know, and like, so you get a lot of that. And I don't, do you guys have kids?
I have two.
I do not.
Okay. So you at least have a little bit of my understanding of like, oh man, you know, what's it going to be like, you know? And I think that's like the biggest fear, because like, yeah, you want to be like the rock star dad, but at the same time, you know, you want to chase your dreams. You want to do these things. So it's like you're balancing the selflessness with selfishness.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I guess some of my mentors growing up, I look at it like I didn't have the greatest of those figures. Well, I had great figures, but I will say like they were workaholics. And so, but I respected them because, you know, their accomplishments and what they did. And, you know, like, yeah, it sucks. You know, no one wants to get woke up at 5 a.m. and have to go to work. But like, I think that's a big part of what made me who I am. And so like, I may have hated my, you know, parents at the time, but then, you know, when you grow up, you're like, yeah, that's created like an insane work ethic. So you always balance that, right? Do you want to be the cool dad? And I guess that's kind of a question to you. Like, how do you balance being the cool dad with also being a dad that like is going after his dreams?
Yeah. I mean, to me, my kids aren't quite probably old enough. I've got one that's 7 and one that's 3. And so like, they're not probably quite old enough for me to like, be hard on them too much, you know?
Yeah.
They're just, they don't know any better.
Sweet things right now.
Exactly. Yeah. They really are, man. And so, like I still can be the cool dad. So I'm not looking forward to trying to be like, my dad was pretty hard on me. And I feel like I probably will be as well, but I have a lot of my mom in me. And, so I'm not looking forward to like the disciplinary side of things, you know? I just want them to like be respectful and act like they're supposed to act. Like, why can't they just do it? You know? So, but then, you know, in the sense of like balancing time and that kind of thing, there's definitely like guilt every once in a while, and sometimes just obviously like pure just missing them as well.
Yeah.
When I'm gone, but being that I am self-employed and I kind of make my own schedule, which tends to make me pretty broke as well. I have the ability to like not work on any particular day, really. And so if there's like some kind of thing I didn't know about, donuts with dad or something at the school, like I can go up there spur of the moment pretty much most of the time and partake in that. Or, when they come home from school at 4, like I'm there. A lot of dads aren't back till 6 p.m., or whatever. So I definitely get to spend time with them that other dads may not, that work a lot. So it's kind of it's a constant battle though. Like internally, I struggle with it all the time and try to figure out like where the balance is. So it's tough, man.
Yeah. And I think that's right. I think it's like it's a pendulum, and like I'm probably the worst husband in September, but I try to be the best husband the other 11 months out of the year, that make up for it. And so like you hear guys like, man, how do you get to go hunting so much? Well, I guess first it's like choosing a good partner that understands your life and your lifestyle. I think, my wife came into this knowing like this is a lifestyle, and she kind of came from a world of, backcountry skiing and mountain biking. So she understood the lifestyle side of it, and not that like hunting's like this hobby that we do 1 week out of the year. And so I think that's a huge part of it, and just being open. I see the struggles with guys that get into hunting late in life. Maybe their significant other views hunting as like this hobby on a weekend or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so you see guys that struggle with like trying to 2 weeks a year to even hunt. But I think it's like obviously it's always about communication, but it's also about being there. So if you're going to be gone 2 weeks out of September, just being, ultra husband or ultra dad the other 11 months. Yeah,
dude, communication's key, man. Like, I feel like that is what keeps you from like having some weekend booked in September, right? The middle of September or whatever, like, or during the rut, in November or whatever. Like, communication is key. So
on that note, I told my wife, we were trying to have kids, and I was like, man, if it doesn't happen by January, it's not happening. I just want you to know that. Like, I'll be sleeping in the barn.
I've talked to my wife a lot about that, and I think that she's on board with the whole, like, at least the first go around. We're going to plan on trying to where a kid is born January on. And then after that, it's going to be like, whatever. But at least for like those first, like that 6 month window, we're going to try to hit it and see if it happens.
Yeah.
But in our, and I'm pretty new to marriage too. We've been married like a little over 2 years. For us, it was kind of a struggle because, we kind of had a long distance relationship for a big part of our dating life. So she didn't get to see my day in, day out. It's like how much time I dedicated to, my life of hunting and that sort of thing. And my job was somewhat outdoor oriented for a little while there too. And then she comes from a family that hunting was like a 1 weekend a year kind of activity, and that's what she thought hunting was. And of course, like as soon as it started, it was kind of a difficult time, but she's kind of understood and now is like totally on board with where I'm at on what hunting means to me, and it kind of culminated the other day actually. Like I called her like pretty overjoyed with a tag that I'd drawn, and like she totally understood it.
Dude, call a spade a spade. You were crying when you called
I was, dude. I was crying, and she joked with me. She's like, "You didn't even cry at our wedding." I was like, "But yeah, I talked about it the other day, but like it was like I didn't expect that, and it just kind of was overwhelming. But I don't know. She got it, and that was cool. That was like it made me happy, and it was kind of comforting that like she understands like how enjoyable and like how like what a blessing that was for me. And like maybe she don't want to do it, but like she gets it, and she gets that it's my passion. And I guess on that note, like, okay, this is where our worlds cross, like you and I, man. You're a self-proclaimed elk guy a while ago, right? And so I'm a kind of an eastern whitetail kind of guy, but I love the adventure. I've been going elk hunting for a while. My parents have been going, or my dad, started back in the 80s. Like it's like we do the elk thing, and I drew a 16B Gila tag this year, and for me, it's like I couldn't believe it. That's why I cried, right? You know, like it's just like unreal, okay? But I'm looking at it from the aspect of like a Texas guy who like just read magazine articles about the Gila when he's growing up and like just thought it was like this magical place. Can you give me some perspective about this hunt, this tag, and like what I really maybe should expect, you know, just like you being a Western elk guy, you know, like what would that, like a tag like that, what's it mean to you?
Man, we were talking about this, and I think we need to do an entire podcast on this.
Okay.
So it is, man, the Gila tag is like insane, but I've also known a lot of guys that went in there thinking it was going to be like a bop it game where they just got to choose which one they were going to hit.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not. Like, I'll tell you that, like, then this should be any tag, man. Like, so many people draw good tags and they like, oh yeah, I hit the lottery, man. We're going to show up, drink some brews and walk out there and shoot a 380 bull. And it's just like not the case, you know? And I think more people than not get humbled by good tags because they go into it without that mentality of like, I'm going to have to work my face off. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying like, man, I think that's my number one advice is go in there like you have an OTC elk tag.
Ooh.
And
I've had those a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would go into it being like, man, and cause like this has happened to me and it's happened to so many people as you go in, you're like, oh, I got 10 days. Like this is the best unit in the state. And all of a sudden, like you have a hard 5 days and also now you only have 5 day hunt and whether or not you get it done and a couple things don't go your way and you pass up a couple good bulls and all of a sudden, and that's not to say that you should shoot the first bull that walks out, but at the same time, like just understand, you know, what you're going into and approach it that way. Yeah. Having said that, there's also something to be said for like not using the same tactics that you would on an OTC hunt. Yeah. You know, like I've had good tags to where in my early days I hunted it the exact same I would, you know, just setting up, doing some cow calling and things like that. And it was just like, you don't have the time to funnel through those bulls to where it's like, you know, the strategy used on that 280 raghorn or 280, you know, satellite bull last year is not going to be the same tactic that you use for 380 bulls. Yeah. You know, I just don't run into a lot of smaller bulls or cows because of my tactics, because I'm only going after herd bulls. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, so it's a twofold double-edged sword. It's like go in after a 380 bull, so meaningfully going after herd bulls and use your time efficiently. You know, hunt it like it's the hardest hunt you've ever had. Yeah. So I think that's my two rules of thumb, I would say, for drawing any like great tag is, you know, work your face off.
I love it, dude. Yeah. Honestly, like I look forward to that work your face off stuff. It's kind of weird, but I talk about it a lot. Like I hunt an experience more than I do a specific animal. So like just the Gila experience is something I look forward to. And like I want it to be that experience you're talking about, like go in there and hunt for something I've never hunted before. And I think, of course, I'm not going to know like my biggest struggle of the trip until after we get back. But like looking forward right now, I think for me, one of my bigger issues is going to be that whole, I mean, I've never drawn a tag in my life and this is the first one I draw. Okay. So it's like, it's weird. Like I've grown up hunting OTC Colorado tags where you shoot the first 4-point you see. And I've done that and it's exciting. But it's going to be really weird, like having to potentially pass elk that are way bigger than anything I've ever seen before. You know, which
is hard. I used to tell people like set a number and stick to that number. But the older I get and the more I've been around that, I think it's a little bit tough to do. You know, set an experience. I think it's important to set an experience because you'll second guess yourself on the number thing, and you'll know when it's a shooter. Like you'll just know, like when there's pee running down your leg and you're like, oh, that's, you know, that's a shooter, man. And so like set yourself up for that experience you're looking for. And I wouldn't stem off that. Like you can easily go into the Gila and say, you know, oh, I'm only going to shoot XYZ. And then you never see it, or you never know if you're supposed to shoot, or you second guess yourself in the time you should have just shot. So I would say just like envision the circumstance or like the scenario that you want to happen, and when it happens, pull the trigger.
Yeah. Dude, that's so good, man. That's like it's exactly what I need to hear, because quite honestly, like I want to kill a mature bull. I want to kill an older age class bull, right? And I've got like a number in mind. You know, I think everybody should, kind of like what you said. But honestly, like if a giant 5 comes in with broke swords, but he's just a big old gnarly brute, I need to, like, I know that like me 2 years from now will wish I would have shot that bull because he's like just an old gnarly brute, you know. But like if you go in there just with such a number in mind and you're just hunting this score. Like, you could leave there and pass a bunch of bulls that you should be happy with, you know?
Yeah.
And I want that calling experience. I've done it some in OTC, you know, and it's awesome. And I think that's, you know, that's why it is what it is, right? That's why it's the Gila. That's why it's like that New Mexico mystique, you know? It's like you go there to do the kind of thing that you see on highlight reels. And
no, for sure.
But
and I mean, like I always look at it like when you're 80 years old and you look back and you're like, man, that hunt, you know, it was fun, but I never found a 392 bull, so I didn't kill anything.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna be like, man, that 320 bull came in and screamed in my face, and I just gave him, you know, 10-yard shot, and it was the most epic hunt of my life. Like, yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Okay, so 3 questions that I'm worried about. And like I said, I've been on 2 sheep hunts, so I have some ideas, but like, you know, they're wall tent, horse camp kind of stuff, and we're probably going to be doing some backcountry off of our backs. I need a backpack, I need a tent, and I need, I think I'm going to get some new boots, but my feet are really narrow and tend to blister up on the heels, so I need something real comfortable. I've worn like some like Columbia, kind of like, you know, they're like a boot, but they're like a tennis shoe kind of thing. But and those are really comfortable for me. I've got some boots that I wore in sheep country, but we didn't do a ton of like real steep hiking. But when I get on those steep slopes, sometimes I worry about that hot spot on the back of my heel there. But anyway, I need just like a quick rundown of some tips, general thoughts on that, or like even some gear that you really love in those aspects. So
I guess we'll start with boots. I have not found a good pair yet, and I get this question all the time, and I honestly I don't have a good answer because I've never found something that met all the specs for me, and mainly that's just because I destroy stuff. I don't know if I'm just hard on stuff or what.
Yeah.
But I've never had a pair of boots that felt like it lasted as long as the dollars I paid for it. And so that's kind of my problem with the fancy boots. I do think they're good. Like I rocked tennis shoes for years. Like probably the first 2 times I hunted in New Mexico, I was probably wearing tennis shoes, if I'm real honest.
Cool.
So I, you know, like where you're going, it's a little bit stiffer country. It depends on what kind of ankle strength you got and things like that. You know, anymore I tend to wear a stiffer boot. I don't know if I'm just getting old or what. Actually, a lot of it's my accident. I used to have really good ankle strength. I have like virtually 0 ankle strength anymore.
Yeah.
So
I can relate.
Yeah. So I have to wear some stiffer boots for that. So I honestly don't have a good answer on the boots.
Yeah.
I wish I did. I just don't.
That's cool.
But, you know, pack wise, I would say, I mean, my Stone Glacier, I love that thing. It's light. I used to have an Outdoorsman, and when I switched to Stone Glacier, I didn't realize how great the world was, because like my Stone Glacier loaded, I think weighs as much as my Outdoorsman did empty. Like it's insane. So I love my Stone Glacier pack. It's been awesome. I've stacked that thing with an entire mule deer, well over 100 pounds. So I know it can handle the weight. The one thing I will say, I know, is it Casey? Are you a pocket guy?
That's Tyler. Tyler's a pocket. He likes
definitely a pocket
pockety
guy.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like him too. Don't get me wrong, but like Tyler's a pretty pockety kind of fella.
He's a pockety guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really likes his pockets.
He does.
So as you know, Stone Glacier, I run. So I don't have any pockets. They're very minimalist type pack, and it's very lightweight. But the benefit is like you can have like these. I call them pods or whatever, like little bags that you put inside. So all my stuff's in separate pods, and so I'm a minimalist and I'm not a pockety guy. I just have like little pods of stuff that's in there. So like all my kill kits in one, all my like, you know, small stuff's in another. It's like little miniature junk drawers that I just stuff all in there.
That's cool.
So that's kind of the way I go. Kifaru is a good pack too. If you like pockets and accessories and stuff like that, they usually, if you're a pockety guy, I would say, man, look at Kifaru. If you're not, the Stone Glacier is awesome. It's light. I love how light it is, and it works great. So this is kind of my two, I guess, go-tos on packs. As far as tent, depends on what I'm doing. So I have a whole array of tents. If I'm kind of basically going to be harsher weather, things like that, I will take my Stone Glacier. It's like a 2-man small tent, backpack, very light, but it's durable. Like, we're talking nasty weather. Now, if I'm looking at, like, say, New Mexico, like that season can get really nasty. Like, as far as rain, you can get some serious thunderstorms in that one. If say I have a tent next to the truck or something, I'm always using my Sitka Courthouse, which is a bigger kind of wall tent. I've horse packed it in a number of times too. I really like that tent if I have, the room or whatever. So if I'm not something I would backpack in with, but so if I'm backpacking, it's usually a Stone Glacier. And if I'm next to the truck, it's usually my Sitka Courthouse. Those are kind of my two go-tos. Gotcha. Are you guys planning on spiking out? Or are you guys bivvying in? What are you doing?
Yeah, we're gonna. I guess. So here's the deal. We're not Western guys, so I get the terminology mixed up, of course, right? So the idea is leave the truck with packs loaded with everything, go in X amount of distance, and then set up, I guess what you'd call spike camp or base camp or whatever, and then hunt out of there. I don't like the idea of like having pack on or like camp on your back all day long every day. It just seems like too much to me. I don't know, and maybe it's just because I haven't had enough experience doing it. But that's kind of the idea, at least. And here's the way I'm approaching this thing. And Tyler and I've talked a lot about it. Like, everything is on the table right now, right? Like, but that's kind of where we're at least what we think is the best plan.
So, like, being 6 or 7 miles back, possibly, and camping there for several days, possibly.
Yeah. That's not what I would do.
Yeah. Really? What would you do?
So, I mean, I have horses, so it'd be a little bit different. But if I didn't have horses, say if I was going on foot, so base camp is usually at your truck. So I would have a pretty mobile camp. I would not get comfortable. Almost never get too comfortable. So, I'm going to have multiple areas, and because it's a wilderness, like, you got to go in. And so it kind of reduces how mobile you can be. Yeah. There's only so many entry points, but like here's how my camp would look. I'd have my truck and I'd have my courthouse, and I'd pop a cot right there, have, my little Traeger on the tailgate, and that would be base camp. Yeah. From there, I would spike out. In New Mexico, I might just take a tarp. I don't think I'd use a full tent just because no grizzly bears are going to be chewing on my feet. So it's really not that much. Like, you talk about, like, I'm going to take 3 days worth of gear and I'm just going to go. I'm going to try to run ridges and just go as far and as hard as I can. And wherever I end up is where I'm sleeping. The problem with, like, elk, they're big animals that cover a lot of ground. Yeah. And when you go in and say, like, oh, here's camp for the next 3 days, like, you can hunt everything around your camp in one day, screw it up. And then you're like, oh, well, now there's nothing here. I got to hike 4 miles. So I would go very light when I go in. I'm going to take a jet boil and a tarp and, maybe 3 days worth of food tops. And I'm just going to cover ground. And wherever I end up at night, that's where I'm sleeping. Try to find water when I can. Yeah. And the point of that is just to cover ground until I get a feel for, like, everything. Just because I know you're new to this area, you guys, I'm assuming not going guided, so you're not going to have any, like, knowledge of where elk are or anything like that. So for me, it's a base camp and it's spiking out. I'm going to come back every 2 or 3 days and refuel just so I can stay mobile and cover more ground.
Is your base camp moving? Like, are you going to different trailheads every time you go in and make those loops?
Possibly. If I made a loop and I didn't see a bull or didn't get any action I wanted, I'm probably going to, like, make a decision right there and be like, okay, do I want to go to a new trailhead or do I want to come back in here? Yeah. And so that's kind of what I would do. That's why I say a mobile truck camp and not be like, this is it. And some guys do that. They'll set up a wall tent and just be like, okay, I'm hunting essentially the west or east half of this unit for the first 2 weeks. And we're or the whole 2 weeks, and we're just going to drive down to this trailhead. So I can camp here, drive an hour, and then start hiking in from that other trailhead, which is doable. So you could have a mobile camp or you could not. To me, it doesn't really make a difference because rarely am I there. Like there, maybe every 2 or 3 days. So maybe you hike in and you're only in 3 miles and you're like, you know what, let's go back out, make camp. We can get back in here, no problem. 2 miles, like you can cover that and sleep in the cot. So I have a cot with my tent set up at the truck, and then I'm spiking in. Whereas I always have my tarp and my jet boil. So if I'm like, man, I went in at 2 miles and all of a sudden this elk went another 4, but I'm staying on him, like, yeah, let's go for it. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
So that's
sense.
kind of how I look at it. New Mexico, you can cover a lot. Sometimes you can cover a lot of ground, and so you could drive over here and check this out. And I like having a mobile base camp because it never ties me down. So the Seek Outside Courthouse I could set up in 2 minutes and just pop it up, throw a cot down, and then most of like my totes and my grill and all that's just staying in the back of my truck. So I'm just using the tailgate as a table, and that's it. That's this extent of my essentially backcountry camp, base camp, so to speak.
I got you.
And so from there, I'll just spike out. So for me, it's about covering ground. New Mexico can be few and far between with elk. I don't know that particular unit, but it wouldn't surprise me if you went, 60, you're hunting 2 spots that were 60, 80 miles apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just how it is.
Yeah. I mean,
so the more mobile you can stay, the better.
yeah, makes sense. And I mean, of course, I'm going to break down the unit, map scout wise, and try to go out there a little bit and do some pre-scout or whatever. But is that tactic? So earlier you talked about like how you have to restructure the way you hunt, right? Because you're going in to hunt a different type of animal in a different situation than what you would like in an OTC unit. Is that style of hunting like kind of geared towards that herd bull hunting? Because you're going in and looking for specific elk and covering ground, trying to find that specific bull?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you have the later season, so most of them should be herded up.
Yeah.
And so the only thing I say, and this isn't something you have to worry about, so when I say that like I'm hunting a specific way to hunt a big bull, is like I'm targeting the herd bull. So I'm looking for the herd. And that's why I'm covering ground and I'm locating, or I'm glassing. Depending on how thick it is, I'm either going to locate or glass. But I'm not setting up in cow calling. Like it's just not a thing. At least not in the late season.
Yeah.
Maybe, but realistically, like I'm probably going to spend 99% of my time glassing or locate bugling. And when I hear a good bull, I'm going to, try to, just depends on how thick it is or what the scenario is. Like, in that country, if it's open enough, then you could probably, just set up an ambush or try to slip in when he's doing, when it's chaos or something like that, to where I'm not going to just go out. Say I had an OTC tag in Colorado and I just wanted to fill the freezer. Obviously, I'm going to try to cover ground, do some cow calling, try to just find elk. I'm looking for any elk. Whereas when I go premium unit, I'm obviously looking for the biggest bull. The biggest bull is probably somewhere near a herd of elk or the herd of elk. Mm-hmm. And so I'm specifically looking for those and trying to be efficient with my time. Whereas like working north facing timber slopes and cow calling is not being efficient with my time. That's wasting time.
Okay. That is stuff I need to know, man, because I literally, and this is like the thing, right? So like, I need to work on this whole changing my mindset a little bit because man, you punched me in the gut actually, because what I look at on the map, I'm like looking at all these drainages and seeing what north facing slopes are there and which ones to hunt, mm-hmm. and if that's inefficient, then I need to really kind of look at the broader way of things, I suppose. And I don't know.
I mean, to each his own. Like, there's just depends. But I would say, yeah, in my opinion, it's inefficient. Yeah. Like, I could spend an entire day working in north facing cow calling and probably I'm gonna end up cow calling in some raghorn, and he's gonna spook. And obviously, if there's a big bull in there, it's gonna screw that up. So I just waste. That's day one. That's 1 day gone. I can't get it back.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm like, okay, I can glass from here. I can look over all of this country, it's going to give me a better idea of what's going on. I need to know the big picture. I don't need to get in there and say, say the first 2 days, I don't need to get in there and call in every single bull in the unit. Because the reality is, like, you don't have enough time to call in every single elk in the unit. Yeah. You just don't. And play guess and check on which one's big and which one's not. And so, you have a good tag like that. You really got to be efficient. And you be efficient by spending, maybe entire first 2 days glassing, learning, covering ground, maybe cast out a couple locates and be like, okay, it sounds like there's 3 bulls in this drainage. I'm going to sit up here and glass tonight because I know there's 3 bulls in this drainage, which probably tells me there's cows, which now I want to see what that herd bull looks like.
Yeah.
So that's how you hunt herd bulls, and you're not trying to hunt every elk in the country.
Yeah. Dang, dude, that is some gold star info right there, man. So, okay, this kind of brings up kind of a broader question. All right, so you're a herd bull guy, but just kind of in a more broader sense, an elk guy in general. Why are there elk guys and muley guys, and why are there not people who just like to hunt? You know what I'm saying? There is, and so my buddy Ryan Lamper is I would say both. He tends to put himself in the mule deer guy category. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on your style of hunting, right? If you love getting in there and screaming at elk, then that's your thing. Some of it boils down to the country you put yourself in, right? Like mule deer guys tend to be high mountain guys. Elk guys tend to be mid-mountain guys.
Yeah.
And that's a weird way of putting it. But at the same time, high alpine basins don't do anything for me. Rolling creek bottoms with aspens, that's sexy to me.
Yeah. I hear you, dude.
So if you're a mid-mountain guy, man, they tend to like elk because that's where they are. And if you're a high mountain guy, now I'm sure there's a ton of exceptions to that rule. But there's guys that, I don't know, like both.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just trying to shoot a whitetail in the mountains. How do I do that?
Dude, that's funny because I grew up blacktail hunting, which is, there's different variations of blacktail hunting. So we call them valley bucks, which tend to act more like whitetail, and then there's mountain bucks. And so there's I look at, say, Bozeman, for example, there's still we have more valley whitetails. I think these are mainly they act like valley. I don't think these deer, and I could be wrong, I'm not a whitetail expert, these deer act more like what I consider Midwest whitetails versus, say, in parts of Oregon, there's true, and parts of Washington as well. Those whitetail bucks act like mountain bucks. They act like blacktails or like mule deer. So they live in the mountains, in these rolly type country, and they just tend to act like mountains. They don't follow creek bottoms. They don't have bedding areas and food areas, or I guess feeding areas. So it just depends on to me, it's more about behavior than about location.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
There's some big whitetails.
Yeah, dude, I've got the itch to go do even if it is kind of a valley deal. I just have the itch to hunt in a western state, and especially early season when we still have a ton of mosquitoes here, and it's hot as all get out. So
my favorite mountain whitetail is late season. I love, because in Oregon, the whitetails tend to rut really late. And so it'll be first week of December, just ruts going crazy.
Sweet. And
that's fun to me.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
Sounds cool. Man, what makes the West so cool? Why is that? What's the place,
cooler.
man?
We're just cooler, man.
So it's we're not really Eastern, right? We're kind of down here in our own little thing. But for all intents and purposes in the hunting scape, we're Eastern hunters, right?
Yeah.
We don't, a mountain to us is something that's 300 foot tall. But for us, you look towards the West and it just seems so cool and so adventurous.
It's adventure, man.
Yeah,
it's adventure. It's the unknown. There's just not a whole lot that's unknown about the old Frank place that's 40 acres and you're going to hunt whitetails on it. There's just not a lot that's unknown, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's the unknown. It's the adventure. It's the big mountains. There's a little bit of fear. I think a lot of guys like to do the backcountry thing because it's so unknown and it's challenging. And there's a lot of pieces to it. I appreciate that, there's something to be said for going hunting and not being the top predator anymore,
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the reason why I have not ventured much north of Colorado in my hunting adventures. I've told Tyler before, and we went to Bozeman last summer, and we're thinking we're cool. There's no grizzlies down here on the Gallatin or whatever, and we talked to our buddy Garrett Long. I don't know if you know him, but he's like, y'all don't have bear spray? What are you doing? So I don't know. Those grizz scare me, man, but I think that that's something that I might need to conquer one of these days. Not killing a grizzly, but just overcome that fear and go up there and hunt in that grizz country and just deal with it, and see what that feeling you're talking about not being the top predator is all about.
Yeah. No, for sure. You guys, there's actually a really cool course. I'm going to screw this up. I think it's like Tactic Montana or something like that.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. I should really memorize this. But it's a bear course. It kind of like helps you, I guess, not take away the fear, but like help you understand, what to do in bear situations, how to, how to act in it, or how to operate in a bear encounter. And they had, I think they did it last weekend, and they had, an actual grizzly bear, one of the Hollywood ones, not the one they found in the woods, but, just to go through that. And, I know my buddy Todd Orr was out there, did some speaking, and I think that's big. I think there's a lot of unknown around it. I think the more time you spend around bears, the more comfortable you get, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
People get a little more comfortable. Which, like you said, can be a bad thing. But, I think there's something to be said for conquering that fear and kind of going on a backcountry hunt in bear country. And the first time it's scary. Every time a stick breaks, you scream like a little girl. But, it's a part of the fun, man.
Yeah.
I screamed like a little girl when a bird surprised me a while ago. It was real close. Don't get me wrong, but
whoever invented putting grouse in grizzly country is a real asshole. Because grouse, oh man, every time it can just be like dead quiet, and like it's really quiet, and a grouse will spook from like 2 feet away.
Oh yeah, it's like an Apache helicopter too. It's not like they're just like a little surprising thing. It's like the loudest noise in the woods.
Yeah.
Golly.
Cody, thanks so much for your time, man. I know it's been a long one, but I appreciate it. We appreciate all the information personally. Like we talked about earlier, the selfish side of things here. We are very glad to get this information about the elk hunting and everything, the trip that we're going to be taking on in September. So are there any plugs you want to make, man? I know you sure people want to listen, our listeners want to connect with you, and go ahead and throw those out there, man.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can catch me on my podcast, The Rich Outdoors. But also, if anybody wants to go on an elk hunt, I'm giving away an elk hunt this year. So one of our Patreons, a little bit ago, we started a Patreon account, and we're going to give one of those lucky Patreons a trip to come elk hunting with me, all expenses paid. You're going to get to go, I think we're going to go to Idaho and just do whatever kind of hunt you want. If you want to do a backcountry hunt, we'll do that. I know not everyone's into that. So I'm game. I'm pretty open. I've told a lot of people, like, if anybody's got some certain type of hunt they want to do, cool, let's do it. If you want to go in the backcountry, we'll go in the backcountry. If you want to hunt from the truck, we'll do that too. So essentially, we're giving away a free hunt with me in Idaho this season. So if anybody wants to in on that, head over to our Patreon accounts, patreon.com/The Rich Outdoors. And all you got to do is sign up. I think we have a couple different tiers. So if you're a tier 1, you get 1 entry every month. And if you become a tier 2, you get 3 entries every month. So we're going to draw that coming right up, I think June. So if you want in on it, you better get in. I think June 5th or 6th, somewhere in there, we're going to be announcing the winner. So that's going to be pretty cool. Other than that, guys, catch me on The Rich Outdoors or everything else, The Rich Outdoors.
Cool, man. So any chance that I win that elk hunt if I sign up?
Hey, you know what? I tell you what, if you win the elk hunt, I'll go to New Mexico and just call for you.
Okay.
Bad to the bone.
Okay. We could use it, man. I'm a newbie at the calling thing, so for elk at least. And I aspired probably over 10 years ago or so. I aspired to be a duck calling contest, one of those guys. So I'm not too bad on duck call, but the elk thing is pretty foreign to me, being from Texas. So,
dude, I think it's an easy transition, in my opinion, from, I used to do a lot of duck calling, a lot of turkey calling, all that growing up. And I think that's helped me be a better elk caller or vice versa. It's just like you understand calling and understanding, watching the ducks and what their behavior is doing and all those things that go into it. But I definitely think if you're a good turkey caller, you can become a good elk caller for sure.
That's good. Casey, what do you think about my turkey caller?
Tyler can make some turkey sounds,
It's well, anyway, we're going to link to all that so the listener can go and check all out the Patreon and the other social aspects of this thing. Also, check out his podcast, the Rich Outdoors Podcast. Cody, thanks a ton for doing this with us, man.
Yeah, anytime, guys, and good luck this year. I hope you're the best, man. Like I really hope you just kill a giant out down there.
All right.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it, dude.
All right, guys.
See you, man. A lot of stuff to think about there, dude.
Oh my goodness, man! That's why I wanted to get Cody on the show.
Yeah.
Because he's just got such a different viewpoint or outlook on this hunt than what I know to have.
Mm-hmm.
Not that like I have a different viewpoint, but I just don't know to have what he's talking about.
Right.
And a lot of things he said, I'm really going to have to break down and think about it. Like the one that jumps out the most is that maybe a true spike camp scenario or whatever you call it, like just go in, set up camp, and hunt from there isn't the best plan. It's man, I just didn't think that like making loops, like 3 days, go back to the truck, go somewhere else, whatever, was the way to go. But I don't know. There are aspects of it that are appealing. You know, I guess you get to run a lighter pack. You get to just kind of see new country a lot more, and I don't know, the aspect of not having to hike an hour back to camp every night in the dark and lose that sleep and lose that, I guess, just that relaxing time or whatever that you might need, decompression after a hard day of hunting. There's some value to it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I definitely see. I mean, it's pretty similar to what we were talking about doing. And I guess the main difference is like actually carrying the tent on your back. But yeah, we had talked about basically having that tent set up or that camp set up back in there and spending 3 or 4 days and possibly coming out, you know?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's, I don't know. I've been kind of against that whole, like, you know, camp on your back thing. But if you really start thinking about it, what's an extra 10 or 12 pounds in your backpack? That's really not much when you start talking about, like, weight on your back. You know, if your day pack's going to be 20, that's going to be 35. But, I mean, if you're talking about day one of 9 days, you know, if you're prepared to stay in 9 days, that's a lot of food you got to carry around with you.
I know, dude.
But I think maybe that's the whole, like, benefit of making the loop thing or whatever.
I would just hate to get in there and on day 4 you need food, but you also are in the mix. You know what I mean? Like you just haven't been able to get it done because of the wind or something like that.
Got to kill to eat.
Yeah.
Because turkey tags are $100 a piece. I ain't paying $100 for a turkey. And I looked up this week, there's no grouse in that unit at all.
Oh, I was kind of wondering about that. So.
I kind of thought there would be, but apparently not. So it's going to be fish or bust.
Whoa.
There is a lot of fish, though. So
that's good.
Yeah.
That is good, yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I'm actually going to spend some time this summer out there, I think, a couple days. So I'm going to do some fish scouting.
Trying to incorporate it into my little loop, too, some way, somehow. Yeah. And, cool. I mean, you and I have talked about spending some time out there, you know, more on just a scouting kind of trip, too, at some point in time, maybe August or something like that, whenever the way I see it, at least, I don't know if this is how it really works, but I would think around August, those elk are kind of going to be in the same general area they are in September. You know, once bulls start herding up cows and stuff, they might move them around or whatnot. But I think if you see cows in August, especially mid-August, like they're probably going to be there in September too, so probably a good time to be there.
A few weeks
and
later.
This is stuff, I mean, we're going to talk a lot about this throughout the summer, and actually this podcast is kind of, I don't know, you say it's like a kickoff of something that we're going to do a little bit more of this summer. Yeah.
I mean, I've got a lot of questions, man, and we're getting some messages from some of our listeners and that kind of thing, and they're super helpful, so thank you for doing that. And if anybody has any thoughts about it, has any experience with any of this gear or any of the thoughts we're talking about, feel free to reach out through social media or whatever, or through our website, and let us know, because we're just trying to gather as much information as we can and then decipher it and hit the woods in September, basically. And so, like you said, we're starting a series. This is kind of like, or I guess this podcast kind of gave us the idea to do this, but it's more short form. And it's going to be just like some pretty detailed stuff from like backcountry experts, people who have spent time in the backcountry, and say like, hey, what boots do you wear?
Yeah.
What tent do you use? You know what? And they're all going to be different, you know. And so you can get, why do you use that? And you can start to understand, hey, that kind of matches up with my mentality. So maybe that's a good one for me, you know. So we're going to start taking a look at stuff, and then, you know, in all honesty, like we may have to buy some stuff before we get to hear from everybody, because, you know, things like packs need to start breaking in. Boots, if which I'm probably gonna. I've got an idea on some boots that I may take into this hunt that are gonna have to be broken in, you know, a little bit. So I can't just wait till late July to start doing that. So lots to think about, but it's going to be a mini series, backcountry series, and we're going to start doing that hopefully in June and July. And so look forward to that. If you have, I know a lot of you guys, we have a pretty substantial listener base all over the place, but in Texas especially. And I know there's a lot of Texans that go hunting for elk in Colorado and New Mexico and even Wyoming. And if you're kind of one of those that aspires to that, this is definitely going to be a series you don't want to miss. So check it out here. We'll make sure and let you know when it starts to release, and it'll probably be like one a week kind of thing for a little while. So pretty excited about that. Also, speaking of Anthony, like we were in the beginning of the podcast, he ended up killing a couple birds on that turkey hunt. And I don't think we talked about it too much.
Glad he did.
Yeah, we are glad he did because, in all honesty, if it had just been you and me hunting for that first bird, you probably would have killed it. I mean, if you'd have gotten a good shot at it or whatever,
Which bird?
The first bird that he killed.
Oh yeah.
And so, but he was just more in position than anybody else, and you had the camera, so it just worked out that way. So it's not that we couldn't have killed a bird, I don't think, but like Anthony definitely put the hammer on that 60-yard shot.
He did. It's a long shot.
So that film is on our YouTube channel. It's called Spring Thunder, I think, or at least that's what the thumbnail says.
Yeah, I think the title might just be Kansas Turkey Hunt or something like that. But go check that out. It's kind of short, kind of fun little watch. Kind of not like our more like. It's a lot different than Hooked was. It's more of a short form, just kind of like vlog kind of thing or whatever. Yeah. But there's 2 birds die in it, so that's cool. Yeah. But yeah, that was fun, man. I got ticked off so bad.
You were so ticky.
Ticked on.
Dude, the one that bit me itches still.
Yeah.
What is wrong with me?
I've got like 17 like that.
They still itch?
Yeah.
Golly, dude. Like, until really today is the first day I haven't really had it bother me too much unless I like mess with it. But man, it's been a itchy thing, and it was one of them little tiny ones. Ugh.
I found 3 in my truck since we got back.
That's just not good.
That like crawled off of me while like we got back in the vehicle. Like nasty. I haven't seen them anymore in a while, so hopefully they're done. So
bug bomb.
They put a bomb in my truck. That'd be bad.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely wear some of that. What's that stuff called?
Permethrin,
or however you say it. Yeah, we're gonna probably wear some of that if we go back up there next year.
I know it.
That's just a weird. That stuff, Kansas, Missouri. A lot of that Midwest stuff seems to have a lot of ticks.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
It's weird, man.
Kentucky, Western Kentucky.
Maybe it's because there's not fire ants there.
Ooh, I wonder if that's right.
Well, that was the kind of thing around here for like when I was a little kid. Ticks were a big thing, and they haven't been in a long time. It doesn't seem like there's not that many, and I think fire ants have a lot to do with it.
Interesting thought. You don't think it's possums?
I don't think. I think the possums around here only like 3,000 ticks a year as opposed to the general 5,000 or whatever it might be. So I don't. Don't look at that stat too much, guys. It'll hurt your brain.
Yeah. Don't believe what you see in media.
That's right.
Especially
man.
if it's
if it's just on
not our media.
a Facebook just picture, don't trust it for the gospel.
I had to tell Jet. He asked me, Dad, is there what did he say? A copperhead rattler moccasin? And I said, no, there's not. He said, well, my friend said there was. And I said, well, you just can't believe everything you hear.
That's right, Jet.
I said, there's a copperhead, there's a rattlesnake, and there's a cottonmouth, and they're all 3 different species.
Yep. Oh, well, that's funny.
It's funny, but it's like dudes don't grow up. Like there are dudes out there that like are acting like the 7-year-old was acting, but they're like 40.
Being a kid and like you'd like fantasize of the hybrids of the really bad snakes or whatever like that. It's kind of cool. Kind of bringing back memories.
Yeah. So anyway, well, I'm excited about these backcountry podcasts coming up because I do have a lot of questions, and this is something. I did some backcountry stuff in British Columbia. We did some in the Black Canyon in Colorado, which was.
You could call it that.
Yeah, it was backcountry, but it wasn't done anyway remotely correct, probably. Yeah. Especially, I just always think the one thing I always think about is that giant tank of peanut butter that you carried down in there. Like,
What
that's
a
the one
dummy.
thing. I was just like, oh my gosh. That
I
is
didn't think I
definitely-
even opened it.
I don't know why I didn't tell you, like, hey, you probably don't need that, you know?
I didn't know, man.
I didn't know. I didn't think about it, really. I was just like, yeah, I mean, I guess he's probably going to eat a bunch of peanut butter.
Yeah.
So
I usually do, but I should have also been like, yeah, when the fishing's real good,
I don't eat anything.
You don't eat anything.
Yeah, I just get dehydrated
Yeah,
and
that's
almost
right.
die.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's been, you know, I've done a little bit, and I've got to see some pros do it a little bit firsthand, but that's not you, in case you're wondering. But I definitely have a lot to learn. And as far as gear goes, you know, it's expensive. You start putting all the parts together, and so you want to make sure you do the right thing, right? So anyway, excited to do that. Go check that film out. And we actually produced a pretty awesome film that we can't really tell you about yet the other day, Monday. So
It's kind of scaly, though, right?
it's scaly,
Yeah.
for sure. We're not talking about turkey scales and feet. So anyway, be looking for that probably in the next month or so. I'm sure you'll be hanging on a limb waiting, you know. But anyway, guys, I hope you get out and do a little fishing soon, because it's going to heat up. I guess if you're listening to this from like Michigan, then you don't have a clue what we're talking about.
Dude, one of our northern friends posted snow today.
Yeah.
It's like coming a blizzard.
I don't understand.
What?
It's 106 right now. Anyway, yeah, I hope you're getting into it before it gets too, if you're in the South, before it gets too warm. I know myself, I'm heading to the Rocky Mountains here in not too long to try to escape this heat for a little while this summer. But anyway, God bless you guys. And remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Tonight, so I can stay on the bright side of the earth.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.